So there's a lot going on right now. And today I'm going to talk about mob mentality and mass effect. And this isn't just a video for white folks, black folks. This is a video for everybody. It's applicable. So follow me on something. There are a lot of protests going on, and people are rioting. And the reason they're rioting all around the country is, well, there's a couple different reasons. Number one, you have mass hysteria. Okay, so mass effect means one person does something and then others who feel the same way but were on the fence do something, and then others do something, and then others do something. Okay, it's an exponential domino effect. It's kind of like how somebody will see a gun and scream. Okay, self-preservation says, you know what? Maybe I should keep myself silent and run. But instead, they make themselves a target by yelling and screaming. Why do they do that? Number one, they aren't situationally aware, meaning this is the result of somebody who has a relatively weak mind. And that's a very common thing. Most people have weak minds. They don't train their minds with meditation. They don't train their minds with military drills or anything like that. And they don't just step back and analyze a situation before reacting. Okay, that's why you have, and this is COVID time, so that's why I'm dressed very comfortably. But the reason they do that is because we are social creatures. That's why you've got prairie dogs, right? You basically have one victim that's looking out, looking around, and then they're the ones that make the noise to protect the rest of the group. Humans do this too. And what separates us from animals is that we can process through and we can rationally evaluate the situation. People aren't doing that right now because their emotions are high. And I mean, I've seen poverty. I've lived in a food desert. I know what that looks like. And I understand why black folks are very much up in arms, because this is not anything new. Not to them. Not at all. There's a double standard in the justice system. And there's a strong double standard when it comes to police. And black folks are tired of it. There is racism. There's no doubt about that. I've seen it personally. I've experienced it personally. I've been pulled over for having a black girlfriend in the car, and the police officer, on his way out after getting the cuffs off of me, and he had no ticket to even give. After he took the cuffs off of me, he parted with the words, "You better watch the company you keep." I think he said son at the end of it. I'm not sure. And I mean, that was one of my first experiences with police and racism. But there have been others. I've been in the car during what's called a DWB, driving while black. And that's an implicit bias standpoint, where officers naturally think that black people are more violent. That's not true. I can attest to that. But the reason people are rioting is this has been going on for so long, and they haven't seen any gains. In fact, they've seen stepping back. And even a few reporters have stated this feels like open season. And I totally get that. Now, part of the reason we have the riots escalating as far as they do, this is where the false flag I mentioned comes into play. So, there was a police officer, which has been identified by his ex-wife. And he was going around full mask, so it was very difficult to tell who he was. Full mask, full garb, everything just to cover up who he was. And he was going around, boom, window, boom, window, boom, window. Then he walks off, and a few people followed him while videotaping him doing that. And he did that on several buildings. And this is where mass effect comes in, is, okay, people see a broken window. People see somebody breaking a window. And that's when others get involved. They say, you know what, they're doing it. That gives me permission to do it. Think of it like this. There's a thing called mass hysteria, which is a part of mass effect. And mass hysteria is, for example, let's say there was an episode on Boston Legal about this, where one person got had a actual issue because they went scuba diving and then they went in a plane, and that change in barometric pressure, or just pressure, period, caused their nitrogen bubbles that formed in their blood from scuba diving. Then you go to this huge elevation and this different pressurization in your plane. And all of a sudden those nitrogen bubbles, boom, expand. And they cause issues with your circulation and your ability to oxygenate your blood. Okay, that was a complicated explanation. Long story short, don't go scuba diving again in a plane. That's a bad thing, give it a couple days. And once people started seeing that on the plane, everybody else started exuding symptoms. And so what the medical professional, it was House, not Boston Legal. And basically House started saying, okay, now if you have itchy hands, let me know. And it was something like that. And then one lady, I have it. And basically it is a compartmentalized hypochondria. Hypochondria is where you're overreacting to anything like, oh my God, I have a mole, I have cancer. Okay? That's not the effect. Like, people can go into a sense of hypochondria or a sense of fight or flight given their surroundings and how other people are reacting. There was an experiment, a fun experiment, where these YouTubers, basically, they were walking normally and then they just started running, okay? And naturally, everybody around them started running too, okay? It's a survival instinct to us. Now, I want you to add in a couple other things to the current situation. So number one, it has been clearly identified. It was a police officer that was breaking windows to give people permission to start breaking windows and vandalizing. Then a few others caught on because people of a, I guess you might say, less reasoning standpoint, they're the ones that will step in and, oh, they did it, I'll do it too. And then amid the chaos, a few other people, some people just like to watch the world burn, and we saw a little bit of that too. And then amid the chaos, some people saw it as an opportunity, because it's either the 11th or the 13th rule of a Mafia vice lord, I think it's the 11th, which is the difference between a normal person and a thief is opportunity. And in most cases, that's accurate. Meaning if they didn't have to worry about any consequences, yeah, they'll jump on it. That's exactly what we saw. We saw people in a poverty situation having access to, and this actually goes back to the last video I recorded on Catholic schoolgirl syndrome, meaning they didn't have access to being able to afford these electronics or this equipment or this Gucci, which Gucci was raided. The Gucci stores, they were vandalized and they were looted. And people can't always afford Gucci. Gucci is expensive. TVs are expensive. So what they did was they actually had permission to go in and get these things by mass effect. Everybody else is doing it, so why shouldn't I? That's how a lot of people viewed it. And true story, the looters are usually from an outside town, not the town that's actually vandalized. Because a lot of people have completely lost their businesses, including a black firefighter that saved up his life savings, invested it into a bar that he just wanted to retire with his family with. And he lost it. It burned down entirely. They even saw people trying to dig up his safe, the safe in the back room. They were trying to get it out and steal it. And they were trying to get into it. And I mean, the man was in tears, and I don't blame him. He worked very hard to afford that as a firefighter. So, I mean, you got these situations going on. You know, I'm going to get some water. You got these situations going on with mass effect where people see somebody else doing something and that gives them permission by proxy, which is a sad thing, but it's a very real thing and it goes back thousands of years. I mean, literally, back in the day there was the greatest library in Alexandria, which was named after Alexander the Great. Well, he lost and people started going in and conquering the lands that he conquered. And one of them was the Library of Alexandria, and there was countless knowledge lost. It was unfortunate. And that was partly due to, it wasn't just an order. People were looting and rioting. We saw that with, back in the days with Hitler, when people were burning books and so on and so forth. We saw a lot of mass effect, where there's peer pressure as well as the allowance, or the grant, I guess you would say, to be able to do this action without consequence. And that's exactly what's going to happen with many of these looters. They're going to get away without consequence. But the long story short is this. What we're seeing is a product of mass effect, but some of it has been engineered. There are actual bad actors trying to get people to riot. Riot and loot. There are bad actors out there. And we've caught some of them on video, thanks to social media, and some of the networks and how well they are connected. But black folks have been dying disproportionately, and for example, there was an officer that was just convicted to 12.5 years. And I believe it was an officer in Atlanta. Okay, this is a black officer who raised his weapon, and a bullet he fired one round. That bullet accidentally, meaning unintended effect, killed a white woman. He was given 12.5 years. Now, many of you watching this are thinking to yourselves, that would never happen with a white cop. And you're right, it wouldn't. It hasn't. There is a clear double standard in the justice system. Black people are disproportionately given longer sentences, which is causing them to always have an elevated state of awareness and alertness. Meaning they get pulled over, their first reaction is to turn on the recording device and to live stream if they can, because they want witnesses in case. And this is understood. For example, my sister, somebody I've known for going on 20 years now. I love her family, and I sat around the dinner table while they celebrated getting discounts on dash cams. Like, they found them really cheap and nice and all of that. In fact, I had to set a couple of them up for them because I've got an IT background. But it was a casual conversation. Every one of us knew why they were getting those dash cams. Every one of us. Like, it was unspoken. And the fear that I have for people I call family and friends, that's a fear that black parents have all the time. Black people have all the time. They get pulled over and they're not sure what's going to happen. And the worst has happened more and more often lately. And it's been shared and viewed more and more often lately with zero consequences to the police. The fact that this police officer actually got arrested makes perfect sense. Now, the immediate autopsy report, meaning it's not the complete report, was stating that, okay, the knee on that gentleman's neck, George Floyd's neck, did not kill him, or at least was not the direct cause of it. There were underlying conditions. That came out literally the day after the officer was arrested. And this is suspicious. This is very suspicious. Only because, number one, that matches autopsy guidelines and timelines and all of that. Like, that makes sense for an autopsy report, like a preliminary report, to come out that quick. That makes sense. That timeline fits. But then it came the exact day after that white officer was actually arrested. And I say actually because that doesn't happen. That really, really does not happen. I've been following this. I stay in touch with many different communities. That doesn't happen. And that's the thing that black Americans have been seeing. And that's why they have heightened cortisol levels from prolonged periods of exacerbation and agitation. What that means is they're in a heightened sense of awareness when they drive, when they go somewhere. They're always on alert. And I completely identify with this, because if I hear a sharp noise while I'm walking, I still get into a fighting stance ready to take somebody down. I understand that. And the longer you are at alert, the higher your cortisol levels are, which means you are more prone to depression manifesting as anger, which is something I've experienced. And what ends up happening there is people become reactive. People, they need to vent, they need to air it out. And these police officers, they don't want to hear it. Police officers, they have a certain mentality, a certain mob mentality of their own. And that mob mentality is, okay, we are this. We are the protectors. We are the ones with authority. We are the ones that administer justice. And naturally, they're all human, which means there's going to be a small element in there that is going to act untoward. And then there's an understanding, because my father was a corrections officer. My mentor was a corrections officer, and several of my friends were or are police officers, okay? And there is an understanding if you talk to anybody that used to be a police officer, because the current ones, they won't really tell you unless they really, really trust you. And I will never name any names, which is why people trust me. They know I will never do that unless you've burned me. If you burn me, then yeah, I'll talk about you all day long. But if you don't, if you're still a friend, or if you're still at least an affiliation, then sure, I'm not going to talk about what we talk about in secret. Unless I get your permission. But the long story short is there is a boys in blue attitude in a lot of precincts. The bigger the precinct, the more boys in blue, meaning you're watching your partner's back. Remember that phrase? And that's how it is when some people step out of bounds, it's taboo. It's looked down upon, and officers have been driven out of their precincts for talking up about it. And that's why people are protesting right now, is they've seen the effects of the boys in blue attitude in these areas where there is implicit bias towards black people. Black people are not more violent. In fact, they're the ones that I know and call friends that I still keep in contact with. I just checked in with every single one of them around the country that I could. I mean, they're the nicest people in the world, and I've experienced kindnesses that I've never imagined from them. And that's because I grew up as I am, with people that look like me and think like me and act like me. I mean, I know both cultures very well. I know Mexican culture pretty darn well too, because my best friend is Latino. He is Mexicano. And I mean, I love his family, I love his mother. I mean, he is my brother, no doubt. And I mean, he is red, white, and blue all the way through. He drinks Pabst Blue Ribbon. Okay, he drives nothing but Dodge. I mean, he is pure American. You better not make a mistake on that one. I mean, he has more guns than I would ever want to own. Collector and non-collector. I mean, he is just a straight up true blue American. PBR is the worst tasting beer that you can ever get, right? It is red, white, and blue though, on the can. No joke. This is totally serious. And he's Mexican, you know? There is a spirit to America that I think a lot of us have forgotten. Whether you're black, brown, white, we are all Americans. And right now we're all in this together, whether we like it or not. And there are bad elements everywhere. Some of those bad elements have become more emboldened over the last 4 years, which is unfortunate. It really is. I thought we were moving in the right direction towards civil liberties and equality. But some people don't want that. And there's a genuine fear. There is a genuine fear from people that have no reason to fear. And then people who have reason to fear are blamed, for fearing. That's why Colin Kaepernick took a knee. And I respect that. But what we're seeing right now is mass effect. We're seeing mass hysteria. Yeah, that's basically what it is mass hysteria. You've got people that want to protest peacefully, and then you've got these others that are fringe or outsiders doing a false flag to get those fringe people to act. And that's where we see the vandalism that's going on right now. The one thing that I genuinely fear is the person who fires the first bullet. I genuinely fear that. One officer was struck down, but that was related to the riots, but not directly related to the riots. What concerns me is the mass effect of either an officer or somebody on the other side shooting the first bullet when there's crowds on both sides, because that will inspire them to act and them to act. And that's all because of mass effect and mass hysteria. Mass effect means one person does it, another does, and it causes a domino ripple effect. And it's unfortunate. It really is. And what we can do right now is we can show support for those who are gentle civil rights activists, meaning they're protesting. And they're talking about, for example, right now, it is the 7th of this month, or this coming month, that every black group that I've been looking at on Facebook and social media, Twitter, they've been calling for a complete boycott to spending on the 7th. I mean, 6th, 8th, that's fine, but they want to show the economic power of black America. And it's gotten to that point where they feel that that's what they need to do. The same way that some of these people protesting and just wanting to be violent, that's out of fear. That's out of mass hysteria. And it's all part of mass effect. And unfortunately, we're in the midst of all of this. And unfortunately, COVID-19 is going to spread because of these necessary protests. And that's the catch, is they're necessary. This has been going on for a very long time. As I've stated before, I've seen it firsthand. I've lived in Southside Chicago, Chicago Heights, Illinois, which when I lived there, it was the second most violent town in all of Illinois. So, and I've been COGIC since I was 14. COGIC means Church of God in Christ. It's Pentecostal full gospel. In fact, I still hear the words, you are cursed with a curse, right before they ask for an offering. That's something endemic to the COGIC church. It's used in every COGIC church that I know of. And I believe it's Malachi 3:11 or 11:3, something like that. But it comes from Malachi. And it talks about tithing. Okay, black folks understand this if you're COGIC. And that's kind of the uniqueness of this situation is, as many black protesters as I see, I also see white protesters. And that's very heartening. Because even in COVID times, even when people are financially challenged, even when rent is coming due in certain places and evictions are already starting, we're seeing people come together for common cause, common civil liberty. Everybody should be considered equal, at least when it comes to the law. And that's also why we had the Wall Street protests. That's why we have the protests about pay to play, which is where very wealthy people or people with strong social status can pay to get their underperforming children into these Ivy League colleges to give them a better and fairer chance, right? Well, the word fair, that's wrong. They're buying their kids in, point blank and simple. The situation has been building for a long time. And I applaud those who are peacefully protesting. And I very much support, because you've seen my episodes on economics. I'm going to list them in the description down below if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're not watching on YouTube, Rideshare Commando. But the short and skinny is this. The protests are going to die off. COVID-19 just got a jump start again. And we're going to have to deal with the economic fallouts of both the protests and just the situation with COVID-19. We're going to go into a depression. There's no doubt about that. And the large corporations, they're not going to hire back the same amount of employees because they don't need to. At least not yet. If legislation is passed, that's fine. But the most important thing you can do this November is vote. If you want to correct the economy, I mean, I've gone through this time after time after time in my head with my autistic brain. And to give you an insight into autism, pick your favorite movie genre and imagine watching every single one of your favorite movies at the same time. I can do that. And my favorite movie is psychology, however it applies. Business, mass effect, rioting, protests, the economy. Psychology affects every single aspect of every one of our lives. And I love it. And I get to see it from a very broad standpoint, like watching a whole bunch of TV screens like in the Matrix, only I can watch every one of those screens. At least passively, like out of the corner of your eye, and then you see something interesting, like, oh, let's focus, while focusing on all these things. That's what I do. And I'm here to tell you, we're going to be okay, but depending on how you vote this November, and you have to vote. You really have to vote. This is the most important election that we're going to have probably for the rest of our lives. And it's the most important election that any of us have had in all of our lives. This is the make it or break it for redefining or continuing to define the culture of America. Period. Economic culture, political culture, social culture, all of it. This election is going to determine the next 30 years. Now, whether we recover fully in the next 5 to 10 from this economic depression also depends on what we do in the polls come November. Please vote. Okay. Google U.S. Census. I'm going to put that up there. U.S. Census. Make sure to fill out your census and to register to vote. This is important. It's more important now than it's ever been. Register to vote. And please go out there and vote. In Oregon, we can vote by mail, and I very much plan to. And I would say vote for your heart. But at the same time, look at all the actions. I know it's going to take a little bit, but right now it's COVID-19 time. So take that time to study up on how your senators and congressmen have voted. And if you back how they voted, stick with them. If you like this other person more and what they stand for, then vote for them. But we've got to really look at our fiscal policies. For example, I'll give you a great example. Mitch McConnell walked into his office initially with nothing. Now he is the second or third wealthiest senator or anybody in politics, period. And Kentucky constantly runs a deficit year over year over year over year. And right now him and his wife are being investigated because pretty much every company that donates to their campaigns gets favorable treatment when it comes to government contracts. Because you have to submit a bid and then they have to decide on it. Sometimes they choose the higher of the bids for those people that donated to Mitch McConnell. Okay? I mean, I can call him out because this is all plain as day out in the open. And he's been an obstructionist in the Senate for quite some time. That's somebody that it's looking very good that he's going to get replaced. And I like that. But you have to determine, is what you have now what you like? Are the people in the Senate and in the Congress, the people you vote for, is your governor, are those people doing a good job? Are they not doing a good job? And look at the other person and see what's the record of that other person. It'll take a little bit to do, but I mean, that's time well spent. Because right now, our country is going to determine whether or not we're going to recover in the next couple years or over the next couple decades. And I very much mean that. Because the precedent that's going to be set from this election is going to carry to the next election and the next. So please be safe out there. Rioting and Mass Effect, that's very real. And it's all built up from people being afraid. Stop being afraid. Take a step back. And to my black viewers out there, I understand. I can't completely understand, but I know the history. I've been following for decades. And my heart goes out to the Floyd family. My heart goes out to all those families. There has been an injustice going on. And the boys in blue thing is very real. And that's what's being protested right now. And people are seeing that as more valuable than keeping social distance. So stay out there. please, for the love of God, wear a mask. The last thing we need is for this virus to continue to spread and mutate. That's why we have a new flu shot every year. Every year we get a new flu shot because the flu mutates, goes through enough people that eventually somebody's going to change it. Their physiology is going to change this virus. This virus, by adopting their cells and basically taking over their cells, is going to mutate. We need to cut this off before it mutates because this one spreads really quickly. And now we've got blood clots in people's lungs and all of that. This virus has already mutated 8 times. It's already jumped 2 species that we've fully confirmed. Okay, it jumps to cats and then back to humans from cats. And then it jumps to, I believe it was swine, pigs, and then back to humans. We don't need to see how many other things it can jump to and jump back. It already came from bats. That's been proven. Okay, it's not engineered or any conspiracy theory like that. But we don't want it to mutate because as virulent as this virus is, this is more virulent than the flu. It spreads quicker than the flu. And the dominant strain of the 8 strains of COVID-19, the 8 mutations that we've documented so far, the dominant one is also the most virulent. It lasts the longest outside the body and it spreads the quickest and the most efficiently. We don't want another evolution of this virus. Otherwise, the people that are fine, that are asymptomatic and all of that, they could get sick and it could be worse. So we've got to stop this while we can. That's number 1. Don't panic, but stay informed. Do your research. Vote. Look up the background of your politicians. Wear a mask. Mask is protecting other people, but ultimately it protects you. Because if the virus mutates, then we don't know what it's going to turn into. But everything that they've run from genetic simulations and just the pathology of COVID-19 that they know of, because they're still learning, none of the mutations look good. So please stay safe out there. I'll catch you next time. This has been, I'll call this one Psych Talk.